I finished Angelic Chaos Reboot, and that's kind of a mouthful. There's not really a great way to shorten it, probably like TSR or like Tesora or something, considering how many damn titles have like Tenshi in their names. This one will be a quickie, and I'll actually try making it short this time around, partly because there's not much to talk about, but also Geminism is coming out, and it's like I'd rather read that. TSR is the latest title from Ubisoft. I generally call the Moe titles something like popcorn or fast food, but these guys are like at the top of these. It's like getting a gourmet chef to handle the food presentation, but the food is just Taco Bell. Meaning the voice acting is great, the art is great, the delivery is great, but the premise it introduces usually goes on to be wasted. Anyways, I've read all the translated ones. I've set up Parquet at this point. This one's more of a middle of the road with just like the best visuals. The common route is kind of bland, but it's not really at the level of what I felt about like Capistella's common route, nor is it like colossal wasted potential like the premise with Riddle Joker. But that's not because TSR handles it way better, but because the premise was overall like less interesting to me, and I didn't have expectations for it. Riku's a normal kid with a smug sister. He's getting a recurring dream about a flame. It turns out it's like he's the reincarnation of the Demon King, and the mana is too much for him to control, so now there's like entities trying to steal that mana, and others trying to help him by like suppressing it, while also teaching him how to like do it himself. So the rest of the cast is either other reincarnations that are resonating with Riku, or like other beings just helping him out. None of the routes in TSR can compete with some of the better routes in like each of the other titles. Even though I think Senran Bak had like a better common route than the actual routes themselves, it's still pretty good compared to TSR. There's moments in TSR, but they're all like pretty short. This is probably like closer to Noble Works than the other ones, and even then, the Shizu route in Noble Works had like a decently long section. I was like, I actually like this one. Honestly, this is much closer to like an SOL title than the usual like Moe Blob title. It's more like one of those girlfriend experience titles, but with the twist that the guy has ED. And that reminds me of this other VN that had something like that before in like a specific route, and the guy I talked to about it thought it was hilarious. And yeah, it was, but this was kind of like overkill here, because each route has varying degrees of time put into that same concept. The joke became roadkill, and I wouldn't necessarily blame them. Basically, they think the issue stems from having like his mana suppressed too well, but I'll get to that later. So the immediate cast is Kaguya, Kurumi, Amane, and Noah, and then Orie and Fumika. They get like unlocked after one route. Kaguya is the older one that's pretty flirty. She's from the other world where the Demon King came from. I assumed the route would cover most of that, but there's actually a small piece in each route. She's basically the cougar. A lot of her H scenes revolve around her like the breeding kink, and not like the more normal kind that people just slap on the title on everything. It's actually like the kink this time around. I feel like her route was the longest of the bunch, but some of it was pretty repetitive with the ED stuff. Kurumi is one of the school friends. She's the quirky one that ends up being like kind of horny one, but that's technically all of them as well. Basically kind of looks like a delinquent, but is one of those like best academically. I think most people will like her, or like Amane's route. She's basically a weirdo and a scatterbrain to give her some faults, otherwise she might have been pretty boring or like annoying. Like, wow, the perfect character, it's annoying. Amane is the sister of Brett that likes to tease Riku, kind of shit talker and a semi-shut-in when it's feasible. She's probably the one that'll get like a few laughs. Kurumi's humor is more of a what the fuck did you say type of deal. Both of them are something you'd get around like the time Nagatoro and those kind of animes were like really popular. I don't track anime all that much like at all, so I don't know if that type of genre died or still going strong. I don't know. Technically, even the group posses with Kurumi is like, alright, it's everything's here. Amane still has friends, but you only get to ever see one of them, and it's not something they really focused on. Like Riku has a guy friend as well, but you see it, maybe he has like 10 lines, I don't know. The guy doesn't even get a sprite this time around, so holy shit. Then there's Noah. She's the angel that's protecting Riku. She's the comedic character where she basically plays her own duo routine. She's proper but loves the junk food. She gets embarrassed with like any sexual innuendo when there's like no one that's actually leaning towards that. She just thinks of her by herself. It's like, holy shit. You know, it's funny. She's basically the foreigner trope put into the extreme, considering she's like an angel, has no recollection or any idea how the human world works. It's funny. I feel like she's meant to be like the lead, but Kurumi technically has more stuff going on in her after story, and like Amane maybe has something there. Sure, technically Noah has like the most plot, but you can really piece everything that was going on from the other routes anyway. Even without them, you kind of understand what's going on. It's like she's not the true route basically. Because it's like, yeah, you know, in Sonoba Witch, like, you know, Nene is the true route, right? In Capistella, it's like, okay, I forgot her name, but the white hair one's also the true route because, hey, it focuses more on the thing. You can say the black hair one's maybe the same thing. I think her name's Natsume or whatever. And it's like one of those things where Let's say in Center and Baka, it's like, oh, I think it was Yoshino or her name was, like, she wasn't really the true route, but she was like the main focus on it. But then you're like, well, then Lena was actually true route because that's the most plot in it. It's like, well, was Lena true route? It's like, we don't know. Anyways, the last two is Fumika and Orie. Fumika is Riku's teacher alongside being like an old neighborhood friend. She almost feels like a retry of Hotaru from Noble Works. Her route is around like half the length of the rest. She's still way better than Hotaru, but that's not saying much since that one was a complete mess and it was like maybe 20 minutes long. I started the title thinking she'd be my favorite, but ended up being Orie. Orie works for Kaguya. She's pretty protective about her, and most of her jokes are either revolve around her or how to not, or like she doesn't know how to handle Riku. There's nothing special in her route. It's pretty much like a SOL type, it's a slice of life thing, right? But it's done really well. And I mentioned before, like, TSR is more of like a girlfriend experience, and I really meant that. It does feel like a title where you come in, do a route or two of the character archetypes you like, and then just leave. Honestly, that's probably the better way of doing it. Your enjoyment might be pretty high in that way. I'm pretty sure Orie was my favorite for the same reason. Some people like, hey, Kurumi's my favorite. Like, technically that's the case with a lot of used subtitles, but generally you can still like attach some kind of story beat that you enjoyed with it or something like that. Or sometimes you lower a character specifically because the story beat you thought, it's like, hey, that one's actually pretty lame. For me, I basically just have to read it all. It's something in me that have like, hey, I paid for it, I'm gonna get all the content. It's like, I've had bad coffee days with that too, where like, hey, I bought blueberry coffee, it's like, oh, this is so nasty, but I already bought like 10, so I have to buy them, I have to drink them all, right? But the point is, maybe they don't expect you to read it all, so they all have to cover like the same shit each route because it's be jarring otherwise. Sure, having the force initial route would have solved that, but that would ruin the whole like, hey, pick who you like and just leave kind of thing. Technically, they could have extended the common route to have like a larger chunk handling the ED crap and then branch off later, but then all these routes would be a lot shorter because some of these routes, it's like, it feels like 50% of that is about that. At least it doesn't become a plot issue like in Dragon Riot, where each route can introduce some kind of group, but then they're just not around for every other route. It's like, where were you the whole time? It's like, I don't know. And you know, at that time, I think I never made anything for it where it's like, okay, so the true route will cover them all like in one huge thing, one finale. It's like, no, nothing there. It's like, oh right, waste of time then. Overall, TSR feels like they're leaning closer to like a more SOL type approach again. From what I heard, EXE and Natsuzoda were plot oriented, but it didn't sell well. And then Noble Works came out, and I think that's like the closest what TSR is, where it doesn't really have a defining character at the front. Honestly, I'm not a fan of that approach, but I can see the benefit of going through that because, like, considering some of these characters, I like, hey, I would actually like this character, but then their route really was so, like complete ass. I was like, holy shit, and it became one of my least favorite characters. Like, okay, it solves that issue. I think Sonobu Witch probably suffers the most out of that because I know a lot of people like, hey, I like this character, and then her route was asked for them. It's like, wow, I hate this character now. Or for me, like, it was specifically Meiko from Samurai Baka, where it's like, her character design looks amazing, and it's like, wow, it's the most boring thing ever. I think some people also complain about like Hazuki from Riddle Joker as well. It's like same issue. You know, the presentation is still great, the humor has been tuned down a bit compared to some of the other titles, but you'll still get like a laugh every so often. I gave it a high 6 to like a low 7 for how I normally score things. But if you don't care about the plot at all and rate it more based on how they handle their SOL content or just being like a girlfriend experience type of thing, then I can see this being pushed to like a high 8. I really enjoyed Oria's route, who had even less plot than the other main 4. It's just one of those things where I doubt people are going to say, this was better than Sonobu Witch, right? It's not. And that's coming from someone that complains about like how a lot of parts were like padded to hell. I think most people will gravitate towards like either Amane or Kurumi, and I think Kaguya needed something extra to be added to her, but to others like the whole Yamato Nadeshiko, whatever it's called, trope is something important to keep. It's like, oh, this is what makes his character great, and for me, like, this is what makes his character boring. There's also the usual complaint that there's just way too many damn H scenes. Almost all of them have like 5 H scenes, and some of them have like, they're actually like 2 H scenes in one, but they're counted as just one. But yeah, for the most part, it's like, yeah, there's still a lot of CGs, and there's enough CGs outside of that to, like, I can't complain because the ratio's fine. Except for Ori and Fumika, where the vast majority of their CGs are from the H scenes, and that was kind of sad. Anyways, this is my tier list of all the Ubisoft titles. They're all around like a 6 to a high 7. You can tell I'm not a fan of Riddle Joker. Personally, I like Noble Works, but I understand that it's also pretty boring if you're expecting anything. You might be asking why Sonobu Witch is in the top of routes, and that's because Nandy can't carry the rest. Not to mention that the route is pretty padded, and it could have been leaned down pretty heavily in the like last hour or two. It was like, holy, it just kept on going. And for fun, I made one for all the characters I do remember. I think I missed like a couple, but overall, they're all here. And that's basically it. Next one will be Geminism. I'm pretty sure it's like under 10 hours, so maybe in 2 weeks.